The Justice Department is dropping its corruption case against former Illinois Congressman Aaron Schock. The Republican agreed to a settlement that will leave him with no criminal conviction if he pays $110,000 in restitution and taxes, and if he stays out of trouble for 6 months. Schock resigned from Congress in 2015 after questions were raised about his lavish spending and tens of thousands of dollars he received in mileage reimbursements for his personal vehicle. In 2016, Schock was indicted on 24 felony counts, including theft of government funds, fraud, and filing false tax returns. And in a new interview with our Ed O'Keefe, Schock says, in retrospect, he shouldn't have resigned.
In hindsight, would you have stayed in office if you maybe thought about it a little longer?
Yes.
And you think you would have been reelected?
Yes.
Because you see now at least two of your former Republican colleagues in New York and California facing indictment. They got reelected with no problem.
I actually don't think I would have been indicted if I would have stayed in office. I think the prosecutors saw me as a sitting duck, having resigned, and based on the line of questioning to my mom and my dad, who were both subpoenaed and put in the grand jury, he would say things like, your son would have resigned if he wasn't guilty of something. And so it became almost a presumption of guilt simply because I resigned. And in hindsight, I didn't realize that when I made the decision to leave. And it actually made it more difficult for me to defend myself in the court of public opinion because I was a former member of Congress.
And here with us now to talk about his interview is CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. All right, Ed, in terms of political news cycles, 2015 feels like a lifetime ago. It feels like
about 2 decades. Yeah.
Right, another century almost, it feels like. But remind us how it is that Schock got into trouble in the first place.
Sure. Well, you know, and I was thinking about this today as the House is voting on a resolution basically condemning or because of what a young freshman Congresswoman did, that he was once the young, new, fresh face on Capitol Hill.
He was a rising star,
he was elected at the age of 27. He was the youngest member at the time, and very quickly ingratiated himself to GOP leadership, made himself available to help recruit other young, moderate, mainline candidates, and because of that was spending a lot of time on the road raising money, and there were a lot of questions about the way the money was being spent on private travel, on sporting tickets that he would buy with his own money and then resell at a profit, but he did it at a clip that federal prosecutors were wondering about. Lots of questions about paperwork issues with his campaign finances, and then there was the question about his elaborate office design. And people may remember that in early 2015, a Washington Post reporter walked into his congressional office, found it elaborately decorated, took photos, and turned it into a big story. Today, Schock pushed back on the narrative that he had his office designed to resemble the show Downton Abbey. Here he explains why. What were your initial reactions when that story landed?
I was a little dumbfounded at two things. One, that my office decoration would be newsworthy. And second, I honestly was surprised by the headline because I didn't even know what Downton Abbey was. When my press aide said to me, the Washington Post is going to write that you have a Downton Abbey office, I said, what is Downtown Abbey? And he goes, no, it's Downton Abbey. And I go, what is that? He goes, it's one of the top rated shows on TV right now. And you know, my staff knew me pretty well, and they knew one thing: I don't watch a lot of TV. And so the whole notion that I would have my office, you know, designed after a TV show was just an anathema to who I was.
And so, you know, it's fascinating to hear his take on it, because I remember reading that Washington Post article and clicking through all those pictures.
Right.
And his designer, the person who was there essentially showing this reporter around, was very proud.
Yes, and had no idea what she was sort of creating for him. He was away at a conference, he said, got a call from the office and said, we've got a problem, sir. Now, remember that bold red color?
Yes.
I said to him, I've never seen any other congressional office painted that way. He insists that it's actually one of the approved colors.
It's not standard issue, though.
That's what he insists that it is. And I, to this day, cannot think of a red congressional office I've walked into in any of those buildings. You see it there. It was decorated kind of Downton Abbey, Abraham Lincoln-esque,
right.
Whatever it was.
Right.
It was the beginning of his end, because it then began to raise all the questions about what exactly he was doing with his money and whether, he was taking the job seriously.
So as we said, I mean, 2015 seems like a lifetime ago, but
Right.
now that Schock is on his way to being clear of legal trouble, what did he tell you about his future?
He says that he does, at 37, you can never say never, and that perhaps after 14 years in public office, starting at age 19, in local government and then getting to Congress at the age of 27, that, yeah, inevitably he might go back to that and thinks that it actually could be useful in the meantime in the private sector, in some real estate work that he's doing, possibly as some kind of a lobbyist or activist or advocate for some kind of organization or lobbying firm. He's still figuring that out. But he spends most of his time now in California working on some commercial real estate projects, even though his family and his political home base is still back in Illinois.
All right, let's take a listen. I hear we have some sound about the future, perhaps return to politics.
You sound like somebody who, while you're out of office now and have had a lot of freedom and opportunity to do other things, would consider going back into it if the opportunity was there.
Well, I think anytime you've done something for almost your entire adult life, to say that you would never do it again might be a little injustice to who you are. I got elected at 19 years old, served consecutively till I was 33 years old, and now have spent the last 4 years defending myself against some meritless charges. Now that it's over, I'm not sure I want to run back into public office, but I did serve for 14 years, so I think I have a perspective. I think I definitely learned things along the way, and I hope to maybe be able to share those experiences with other people that are going to run for office, perhaps with people who want to lobby the Congress or their local government on how best to do that, because I've been in the seat of being the decision maker. And I also use that 14 years as a huge learning experience. I met a ton of people. I learned a lot about different issues. And I think I can use that to make an impact on my country and my community and not necessarily have to run for office again.
Okay, Ed, so I didn't hear him shut the door
Nope.
completely there. I was listening for the no, and I didn't hear it.
Nope. And I, we'll see. I asked whether he'd do it in Illinois or California, and he wasn't sure. But he also said he isn't necessarily aligned with the president when it comes to issues facing the Republican Party these days. So I think if he were still in Congress, he'd be one of those outliers, like a Will Hurd or an Adam Kinzinger, who is still, or at least now, considered far more moderate than they might have been back in the day. We'll see.
All right. Really interesting to hear from him. A storyline from way back when in 2015.
Right.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much.